Welcome back to Valence. We are doing a pre-record with Alan Steinfeld about his new book, Making Contact. During the live program that we did a few weeks ago, we had a few dropouts in audio, so we're back to do the full thing all together. And thank you, Alan, for coming back on and talking to us.
Well, it's great. I mean, there's my book. It's not too big on that screen, is it? It's a little like in your face type of book, isn't it?
It is a book release after all.
It is a book release. So yeah, and the book is about what it looks like it's about. It's about UFOs and making contact with other levels of consciousness, which is sort of what you're talking about anyway.
Yeah, that's generally what we talk about. And I'm interested. So before I was asking you about the timeliness of your book and if that was intentional, and you said, I don't think you said it was necessary. It was just synchronistic. So tell us about the lead into publishing this book and the other more macro level things that are going on right now.
Well, when something is in the collective psyche, there's lots of thoughts about it, and it materializes in many ways through many different people. And I talked to this publisher in October, signed a contract in November of 2020. No, it must have been 2019. Yes, 2019. When I got the contract to write this book, I went to this publisher, St. Martin's Press. You can find the book on St. Martin's Press. I went to him with another UFO book of a case study I've been looking at for 10 years and getting information. They said, no, we're not ready for that. But why don't you, since you know everyone, why don't you get a collection of essays together about all the latest people in the field? And so all through that quarantine time of 2020, the beginning of that, I was contacting people about the UFO movement, about the people I consider the best in the field. Do you know the UFO field? Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley, Strieber. You know who John Mack is? John Mack was a Harvard psychiatrist. So I didn't contact him because he's no longer with us, but I did contact his archivist, who I said, you know, there's this unpublished essay on the website in just an audio form. I'd like to put it in the book. And it really reads in a very contemporary fashion. So these are the best minds. And these are not people with tinfoil hats. These are people who take this subject, seriously, is putting it too mildly. They feel this subject, ETs, UFOs, is a turning point in human history. And it is. It's probably the most fantastic thing we've embraced as a civilization. So that's what I thought. That's what's more important than the fact that, yeah, there are UFOs, there are ETs. We are at a pivot point. It's like every century or every couple of hundred years, the invention of the printing press, the discovery by the Europeans of the New World, even though there were people living there, they didn't really discover anything. But that was a turning point in the kind of intellectual history of the West. And we're talking about Western mind because, you know, the indigenous people already know there are beings out there. They've already been touched. I just was with Clifford Mahooty. And star people are common to indigenous wisdom. But
is that the term that is used commonly?
Star people, yes. In the Native American tradition, I think in the Aboriginal tradition, which I've studied with the Aborigines, star people are space brothers, or I don't know, J.J. Hurtak calls it cosmic others, cosmic cousins. There's no actual terminology. And you know why? Because nobody really knows what's going on. It's true. Nobody. I have all these people in this book with different points of view, but I can't say any of them are right. But I've just disappeared. It's so strange to disappear from reality.
You're good at that.
I am. But no one has the right. Nobody has the whole complete answer about this. There's no ultimate truth because there's so many moving pieces. When you go to look at the phenomena just a little bit below the surface, it's not just that there's government cover-ups, and that's true. but there's a paranormal element to this.
Mm.
There's like a synchronistic thing. There's a telepathy
Mm.
thing. There's other levels, which is one of the reasons we went from UFOs to UAPs, because it was more than just objects. There's actual events that are linked to this phenomena that take us outside the realm of this reality.
This one of the things that I find so interesting about this is that there seems to be so much variability within the experiences of people, descriptions of what people are seeing or experiencing. Maybe that has something to do with why nobody really knows what's going on, because there's just way more out there than we could possibly be aware of. But this crossover between, so, you know, this concept, this like man-made construct that we have of an ET or UFO with a construct of paranormal, with another construct of maybe like light beings, and they're it's a bit gray. It didn't know what is
that's
what
a good
exactly.
pun, the grays, you know, they talk about but it is a bit gray. That is one of the major problems people in this book, the researchers, and what I sort of am most concerned with, you know, we have this sci-fi overlay, and like even me, it's like, wow, they're really UFOs. It's like a science fiction movie. The government's talking about this. It's like, you know, where's the commercials? And it's like, we've been two things when you kind of get that science fiction overlay. First, it opens people up to the phenomena as a consideration. The other thing is that it limits our scope. This is not a movie. We are not living inside a little film that begins and ends. There's a depth to this that makes us want to think deeply about existence. So the overlay of the sci-fi media, and let's try to understand this, is in the way of what's really going on. This is not understandable in the ordinary sense of understanding. Yeah, everybody wants to put it into a box and say, oh yeah, I know what it is. It's like, I think I said in the last interview, we call something a UFO, unidentified flying object, as if we're identifying something as unidentified. That's doublespeak. We don't know what is going on. We don't know what it is. And we have to be okay with that. That's the problem with science. You know, that's the problem with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who wants to say, oh, they just saw that on their sensors. It may have been like a glitch on their radar. It's like, grow up, Neil, face the music, get over your scientific kind of dogmatism, because science is great. I know you're a scientist, but it's also full of dogma. Junk DNA is my favorite example of like, oh, we don't know what it is. It must be junk. So we have to sort out what real science is. Real science is, oh, we have a phenomena here. Let's try to understand it. It's what, what's that doctor, there was some guy who I interviewed many times. He says, this is meteorite thinking. It's meteorite thinking was in the late 1800s. They said there were not rocks falling from space. Someone said, but I saw a rock falling from, he said, you must have been making it up. There cannot be things falling from the sky, until they found things falling from the sky. And you know, Thomas Kuhn, Revolution Scientific Theory, that is one of the most important books I think everyone can read. They say you have to look for the anomalies within the old view in order to create the new world view. So the anomaly is there are things in the sky that we can't explain. It doesn't fit into our world view. So if it doesn't fit into our world view, we throw it out or we expand our world view. It's like, that's the choice. We throw out facts that don't fit, or we expand the worldview. So it's an obvious choice, right?
I wonder if your survey, these essays that are in your book, how many of those experiences that people write about do you think are happening in our time space, and how many are happening outside of this dimension?
That's a really good question, because these beings, whoever they are, for me, don't exist in this time space. They can come into this time space, but if they were to appear right in front of you now, Jonathan, your perception would be distorted. This is my theory. It warps their field of consciousness, warps our awareness. It just kind of distorts our consciousness field. So they don't exist in this time space in the same sense, but we actually just don't exist in this time space either. We appear to, but we're existing on many other levels, and they're sort of stretching us to those other places. So the other thing is that, what was the first part of your question? Oh,
yeah, how many are in this time space and how many are not? Because there are craft and there are like specimens that people, there's like some type of material associated with some of these experiences, right?
Right. And they take people's DNA because they need our DNA, some people say, to evolve their own species. So I would say what we're calling time space is a surface, like the surface of a body of water. And what we're really existing in are levels of things. So they may exist underneath the level, but it's sort of in this time space, but not. Maybe it's a faster frequency, and they lower their frequencies in order to interchange with us. But it's like we are just looking at we're really flatlanders. This is what Ken Wilber calls us. We live in this basic two-dimensional world, and we don't see the depth here. And there's a depth into this moment. As you look at that, you can start to see the world as more three-dimensional. That's a depth. And if you start to drop into who we are and what we're feeling, there's a depth that's beyond the surface of things. So this phenomena is helping us go more into the depth of who we are. Of course, a lot of people are choosing not to do that. They're just looking at the craft in the sky. But I think that's part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And to get more into what you were talking about, when one witnesses a being like this, that you are witnessing outside of time space for the most part, not inside time space.
Time space as we
are shifting, not necessarily them.
Yeah, they are shifting us to their frequency. That's my feeling. Yeah. And there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance that happens. Like, I'm looking at you, you're human for the most part, right? I know you eat, you sleep, you have a mother and father. When you deal with these aliens or look at them, they don't even have facial, and we're so used to looking at faces, the facial recognition. I can see the subtleties of your mood. Imagine looking at someone who's just blank. Like, there's no way to gauge in with those beings, and that's actually shocking.
So that implies maybe a lack of emotionality. Because usually what we read off of people's faces is emotion. Like, that's what we're taking in. That's what's signaling to us.
I thought about this a lot. On the surface, it implies a lack of emotionality, but if you feel in beyond the surface, if you feel into these beings, you'll get a sense of where they're at. So there's this, we look at people and we need the facial recognition. Maybe some people are great actors, so they're giving us a signal of something that they're really
Excuse me. I think I inhaled part of that that pretzel. Bless you.
Thank you. A little doctor break there. That's the human part. We can laugh. We can express.
Can we pause it?
Yes.
I need to get some water.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
It's not the right one. Oh my gosh, that's okay. No, I like that you're asking these questions because it's helping me to think more.
So feeling,
Yeah.
are we going now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
we're back. So feeling into a contact experience is almost a telepathy telepathy connection.
I think so. That's a good way. Yes, of putting it. It is. You're feeling the essence of that being, the empathic quality. So telepathy and feeling, is the future for us. This is where we're heading to, and this is where we should be heading to as a human race, the feeling sense of who we are. It's feeling is the reason you've incarnated into that body. Do you know that?
I like that. Well, it is a transcendence of needing language and words, needing facial expression as a way of communicating. It's going further into our senses of intuition, of empathy, and stepping to some extent outside of the rational critical mind, which is limiting in our ability to accept more than what we think exists out there.
Yeah, no, there's so much more to us and to feelings and to sensing and to the depth of who we are as human beings that we have to discover it. This is our mission, to discover it and express it in whatever form that expression comes to you in. Maybe art, maybe working out, maybe talking, maybe this is the reason we're here, is to feel into our own creative expression. And that's the excitement. That is, so the ETs, whatever's out there, they don't have anything over on us. They may be more intelligent, but they're not more creative. They may be more on the edge of another dimension, but that doesn't make their soul energy more powerful. We're all here to wake up on our level of the journey.
Let's take a couple minutes and discuss this geopolitical backdrop of disclosure. That was pretty heavily involved in our discussion live.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that the listeners are aware of this. If they're not aware of you and the UFO community, this is important.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. So the question is,
well, give us a backdrop of what's going on with this disclosure leading up to,
okay,
a couple of days from now.
Yes, a couple of days from now, supposedly the Senate Intelligence Committee, headed by Marco Rubio, is going to get a report from I think there were 13 different intelligence agencies saying what's going on, what do they know about UFOs or UAPs in this situation, and what have they been kept secret from us, the public, since Roswell. Roswell's sort of the jumping off place. Well, of course, there may have been crashes before Roswell, but everyone knows what Roswell is, thanks to the work of Stanton Friedman, who kind of rediscovered that in the early 60s. He met Jesse Marcel, who was a part of that Roswell Air Force team that picked up the debris from the ranch outside of Roswell, brought a little piece home to his family and said, look what the sergeant made me pick up in the field. And it was this aluminum that could be bent and it goes back in shape. It had some writing on it. Jesse Marcel Jr., who I had interviewed, talked about holding that as a 10-year-old. This is 1947. He's 10 years old. His father comes home and says, look what I've got. And the next day, the government comes forward and says, oh, it was just a weather balloon. And there's actually a picture of Jesse Marcel holding this kind of tinfoil with this like thing, looking at his face saying, this isn't it. This is not, this was a pose photo. So that began 75, or really 74, because we're going back to 1947, 74, or almost 3/4 of a century of lies top of lies, on top of denials, on top of innuendos. There's always like every decade you seem to get a little flurry of activity. Like there was a flyover in 1951 over the Capitol. There's pictures in Life magazine about this. And President Truman came out in that year saying, if UFOs or flying saucers, that's what they call them, if they exist, I can assure you they're not from any country on this planet. They're not. So we go through these flare-ups in the 50s, in the 60s, there's the Betty and Barney Hill case. In the 70s, there was Travis Walton. In the 80s, it was Whitley Strieber. In the 90s, John Mack was coming out. In the 2000s, we get these sightings off the coast of San Diego and the East Coast that are aircraft carrier watching these objects. So for some reason this year, 2021, there's something that's sticking about the story. There's something that is not just fading away in the media puddle of non-existence. Like, there's something that's catching up, because the media, of course, we have a different media environment, for one thing. Media is not just, maybe we grew up where there were 3 channels on television. That's all you watched. Or maybe WABC radio or something when you're driving somewhere. But the media environment is so vast and so multifaceted that there's so many facets that just aren't letting the story go. And of course, the mainstream is picking up on this because they're still dictating the kind of narrative that we're supposed to listen to. So this story has legs, as they say.
Yeah.
And we're about to get this release. And some people say they're not going to tell us anything. Other people say maybe they're going to say it's aliens. Right now, we don't have any evidence that they're going to say it's aliens, because they don't even want to admit that it's alien technology. They say, there's a quote by Luis Elizondo. Am I describing this okay?
Yep.
He said, these are not from any planet, any country we know. That's a great backwards way of saying it's alien technology. Right. But they never come out and say it's alien technology, because they don't use the A word, because coming out and saying there are aliens visiting us totally warps the narrative field. And something else is possible.
What do you think let's just say the media in general, what do you think the media wants the public to believe about
That's
this?
A great question. They want us to believe that this event happened in 2004. There were ships being sighted. We don't know what they are. We'll get back to you when we figure this out. So they don't want us to think too deep about this. It's like, there's something out there. We don't know what it is. Go back to sleep. Everybody's okay. When what's really going on is there's something of the utmost importance that's being hidden to us right in plain sight. We don't know what it is, but if these things do exist, and I think they do, and if they're not from any planet, the technology, the biology, the history of our true history in the cosmos, the sociology, obviously they've been able to get along with each other. So there's so much that actually I feel civilization begins at that moment. We acknowledge there are off-world beings. There's other intelligent life in the universe. Civilization history has been a prelude. Everything that's gone before has been a prelude to now. And when we say this moment has arrived, because right now we're still teaching Darwinian evolution, like life is an accident. It's a lifeless universe out there. It's meaningless. If it's lifeless and we're some anomaly, some strange freak of nature, then it doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
And so, but if we're not, if life is an emergent property of creation, which I believe it is, then maybe there's a deeper level of the soul. Maybe there's an eternity. Maybe it's coming from a higher source, this creation. I'm not saying God, but there's a greater intelligence that we're all a part of, that we are actually a fractal of. So this has huge implications, and the government is working its way up to this moment. Does it make sense?
It does.
Isn't that amazing, though, that we're about to see history in the making right here if they're willing to tell us the truth?
This is June 25th, which is just a few days from now.
Interesting enough, on June 24th, Kenneth Arnold, also in 1947, coined the term flying saucer when he saw these 9 craft going over Mount Rainier. He was flying out of Washington State, and he reported, hey, I just saw these strange saucer-shaped craft going south from Mount Rainier. So anyway, this is kind of the anniversary of that moment in time. And so, yes, June 25th, we have a chance to wake up from our slumber, our denial. Actually, Linda Moulton Howe in this book calls, we are an enslaved race. We are manipulated. We are being lied to. We're being abused because we don't know the truth of who we are and our place in the universe. This has huge implications on just the level of our quality of life.
Yeah, I like your point earlier about the mythos, breaking the mythos that we are insignificant because we're anomalies.
Right.
And this would definitely completely change that paradigm, because if we are not the only sort of upright bipedal creatures with intelligence in this, then there is a uniqueness and a value within the uniqueness that needs to be acknowledged. You have to face that.
Right.
And when then the moment you recognize there is a unique value among humanity within this larger cosmic field of, however many different kinds of beings there are, then we start plumbing what that uniqueness is. And we start, being able to contribute to a larger whole in a way that is unique.
Well, yeah. And right now we're at this moment in time where we don't know. Maybe people are seeing things and they're not alien, they're everything, but we don't know. Maybe there are aliens. So I take the position actually in this book that I compare it to, the movie The Life of Pi. Did you see that movie? So at the end of the movie, the investigators come to whoever that character was, and he tells them the story about crossing the ocean with this tiger, and the inspectors say, well, we don't believe that story. That's too far-fetched. So Pi, I guess the guy's name is, tells him another story, how he was all alone on the ship and he had to survive, and it was hard and awful. And then he says, well, which story do you prefer? The one with the tiger or the one that we're alone? I prefer the one with the tiger, because it's all a story anyway. Well, I'm making this up. You're making this up. You're making all this up, Jonathan. This is your creation. You are making this up. But we're only believing stories. So you believe the world is this. You have a belief that belief is make-believe. What do you want to make yourself believe? Until that alien standing in front of you, it's all belief. So I prefer the story with the tiger. It's more exciting. I prefer the story that we're not alone in the universe. And if you prefer, not you or other people prefer the story that we're alone in the universe, how does that make you feel? That you're alone in the universe? And of course, Arthur C. Clarke said it really beautifully. He said, there are two choices. Either we're alone in the universe or life is abundant. Both considerations are phenomenal. If we are the freaks of nature, then that's pretty amazing too. But if life is everywhere, which I think it is, I think life is an emergent property of creation. Emergent means it's just there. I mean, DNA, according to Gary Nolan at the University of Las Vegas, is older than the Earth itself. DNA is 10 billion years old. The Earth is 4 billion years old. How do you explain that? And he kind of gauged this by the complexity of the DNA molecule. He said that could never have developed in that short a time. We needed twice as long at least. So there's a lot of questions. And basically, whether this is true or not, I want people to ask the question about their existence, about their conditioning of mind. Why is it so hard to believe that there's other life forms? Why is that a big deal? It makes me frustrated to say, I mean, I was teaching this adult education class, and the woman leading the group, or the administrator, said, no, I don't like discussing this idea. I mean, she played the most ridiculous, like, no, we're going to play the stupid movie instead. And they played this gibberish from a Danny Kaye movie, and said, that's proves my point. You would rather listen to gibberish, nonsense, than contemplate a bigger reality. So this is the crossroads we're at. And we're about to cross one direction or the other. We're about to know that life is abundant, or we're about to say, you know what, we're fooling you all the time. There's nothing to it. It's all technology. It sort of reminds me of my own mystical awakening. And in the early 80s, I was kind of looking, I heard about mysticism. I read autobiography of a yogi, and I was looking for a teacher, and I thought, well, if there really is something to spirituality, well, first I thought, if there's nothing to it, then I can see it's just empty. There's no depth to it. But if there is something to it, maybe it's a door worth going through. So I went to this channeling by J.Z. Knight. You know J.Z.?
Mm-hmm. Rampa, right?
Rampa, the Enlightened One. Yes, that was my first teacher. And so I go, I'm a little skeptical because I'm coming from a psychological point of view. Like, my whole background is, like, I studied psychology, and it's all a manifestation of the mind. And this woman's sort of crazy, or she's like, split personality. And then, there's about 100 people in the audience in the early days of Rampa. Rampa is marching around. Did you ever see Rampa marches? Like he's an old warrior, and it's in New York City. I remember 73rd and Central Park West, and he's answering questions about, like, people's cats or their relationships, and, like, whatever, teachers were doing. And then he calls on me. He says, "What say you, beloved entity? How be you this day in your time?" And it was like this Shakespearean sort of this moment. It was a moment, but it was like the Shakespearean oratory. And it's like, me? Are you calling on me? I said, and it's like, yes, indeed, master, I'm talking to you. And it's like, at that moment, everything sort of dissolved. Not the whole world, but like the fabric of reality sort of got hazy and misty. And it's like, I didn't quite have an out-of-body experience, but I felt there was a force in me that was greater than my body. Mm-hmm. And that was a moment where the spiritual journey began. And I said, I think there is a depth to mystical teachings. I think if you go through that door, the door shuts behind you. You can't say, no, just kidding, I'm going back to watching baseball and drinking beer. There is a awakening. And the awakening is progressive. It's ongoing. Mm-hmm. So that was a moment of awakening. Thank you for asking about that, because it was like, that's what the show's about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when that moment of seeing a different level of reality, it's like, then I wanted to read every book on mystical literature. I wanted to find out everything there was to know about this other realm that no one talked to me about in white bread America. How come this wasn't on the radio? How come I wasn't learning about this in school? How come there weren't more books available? Of course, I did find books in metaphysical bookstores. And at the time, there was the great bookstore in New York City called Weiser's. Did you ever hear Weiser's books? No. That was a great metaphysical bookstore. So, and there was a teaching of the science of the soul. So it's like I sucked up every little bit of juice. And of course, life is not just confined to this level of vibration. There's levels and levels of life and the life force. And, maybe there's not beings out there, maybe they're right here, but there is if you've had some kind of awakening, and we'll talk to you about that, then maybe you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we got your book linked up.
Thank you.
On the page. So if anybody
Yes.
wants to get that, it's real easy. Just click over to Amazon and get that. Alan, thank you.
Thank you so much for your inquiry, because I think you're still, I mean, looking at you, it's like, I think you're still saying I mean, I think you're integrating. This is when I look at you, it's like, and everyone's doing, I'm doing it to some degree. Could this really be true? Could there really be alien? I mean, could these beings actually be an actuality? Are you still sort of, because I still am, to tell you the truth.
My integration process is more connecting it to what I already know.
Which is what?
Well, so I've had mystical type experiences. And so I'm defining an architecture of dimensions and an architecture of beings within different dimensions, and relating it to what I already know. And so that is how I'm integrating, not can I handle this idea of another being,
no, it's not about handling,
but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a different, I'm in a different angle, you know?
Right. But I don't think it's handling it so much as, is it real? Is it true? Could this real? How come? I mean, that's where I'm at. If this is true, that we're inhabiting a universe with other beings, how come we don't know it? How come this is not common knowledge? That's the thing I'm at. That's why I think a lot of people are at. That's why you listen to some of these newscasters. It's like, you mean we've been lied to? When you said there's no things out there, he's talking to Tucker Carlson, for instance, talking to Christopher Mellon. Says, really? The government's been lying to us? It's like, well, wake up. Anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah. So
thank you for that.
Yeah.
So yes.
Good. So we can cut it there.